The massive alien ships floated quietly in the darkness of space, like sleeping giants. Admiral Thylex, a tall creature with blue skin and 3 beating hearts, stared at the glowing screen in front of him. His long fingers trembled as he read. The impossible information below them spun a beautiful blue and green planet, but the computer kept flashing red warnings. This world was marked as Class 12 Deathworld. In the entire galaxy, only 12 planets had ever received this terrible rating. These were worlds so dangerous that no thinking creature should be able to live there. The air itself could kill you. The weather could crush you. Even the plants and animals were deadly beyond imagination. But the sensors were picking up something that made no sense. Radio signals. City lights, technology. Someone was actually living down there. Admiral whispered his second-in-command. An insect-like being whose antenna twitched with fear. Something is coming up from the planet. Alex felt his stomach drop as he watched a small ship rise from the surface. It looked rough and ugly. Compared to their smooth, advanced vessels, the metal was thick and heavy. The design was simple but strong, like it was built to survive terrible things. His science officer, creature with 4 eyes and purple tentacles, was scanning the approaching ship. "Sir, the readings are ... disturbing. The gravity inside that vessel would flatten most of our people instantly. The radiation levels alone should have killed everyone aboard within minutes." Through the ship's windows, thermal cameras showed the heat signatures of living beings moving around normally inside. They were walking upright in crushing gravity. They were breathing air that would burn the lungs of most galactic species. They seemed completely comfortable in conditions that would be torture chambers for almost every other race in the known universe. "Try to talk to them," Thylex ordered, though his voice shook. All 3 of his hearts were pounding so hard he could barely think straight. The communication system crackled and buzzed. Then a face appeared on the screen. Thylex gasped and took a step backward. The creature had 2 eyes positioned on the front of its head like a predator. Its skin was pale and soft with no protective covering. No scales, no shell, no armor plating. It looked like it could be hurt by a gentle breeze. "This is Captain Lee of the Earth vessel Horizon," the creature said in a calm, friendly voice. "We come in peace and hope to meet new friends among the stars." Thylex stared in shock. The being's eyes were focused forward like a hunter's. Its mouth revealed white teeth that were clearly designed for tearing meat. Everything about its face screamed dangerous predator. It spoke with kindness and curiosity. But what terrified Thylex most was how normal the creature seemed. Captain Lee sat relaxed in his chair, breathing easily, completely unaware that he was surviving in conditions that would kill Thylex in seconds. The human's heart was beating steadily in gravity that would crush most aliens flat. His lungs were processing air that would burn through alien tissue like acid. Double quotes. "Welcome. Welcome to the galaxy," Thylex managed to say, though his voice cracked. With fear, he looked at his crew and saw the same terror in their eyes. These humans had climbed out of a world that was basically hell itself. They had evolved on a planet where simply existing was a constant battle against death. Every single day of their lives had been spent fighting to survive impossible conditions. What kind of warriors would such a world create? What kind of strength would such creatures possess? Thylex realized he was looking at beings who had literally conquered the impossible just by being born and staying alive. The human captain smiled, showing those predator teeth again. Completely unaware of how frightening he appeared to the alien crew watching him, the massive assembly hall of the Galactic Council Station buzzed with anxious whispers as representatives from 47 different species took their seats. This was supposed to be a routine first contact ceremony. But nothing about humanity's arrival had been routine so far. The station's environmental systems had been pushed to their absolute limits to accommodate as many species as possible in one room. The atmospheric pressure was set so high that most delegates needed special breathing equipment. The gravity had been cranked up to 8G, which was considered dangerously intense for the majority of council members. Even the air mixture was a carefully balanced compromise that left everyone slightly uncomfortable. When Ambassador Park stepped through the main entrance, Collective gasp echoed through the chamber. She walked calmly across the platform wearing nothing but a simple diplomatic uniform. No breathing mask, no pressure suit, no gravity assistance device. To the assembled aliens, she might as well have been strolling naked through a radiation field. Counselor Vithera, whose species looked like living crystals, felt hairline cracks forming in her protective shell under the crushing gravity. She watched in disbelief as this human female stood perfectly straight, showing no signs of the bone-crushing pressure that was making most delegates struggle to remain upright. Honored delegates of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Park began, her voice clear and strong. I bring warm greetings from the people and government of Earth. The atmospheric pressure in the room was so intense that it should have collapsed the human's lungs within minutes. Yet Park spoke as easily as if she were having a casual conversation in her own living room. Her breathing was steady and relaxed, completely unaffected by air that burned the respiratory systems of half the species present. High Speaker Zorix, a tall insect-like being whose breathing apparatus was working at maximum capacity. Just to keep him alive, managed to rasp out a question. Ambassador Park, please tell us about your homeworld. We are curious about the conditions that produced your species. Park's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm, and she smiled broadly. The expression revealed rows of sharp white teeth that were clearly designed for tearing meat. Several delegates instinctively recoiled at the sight of such obvious predator. Features, O Earth is absolutely beautiful, Park said with the warmth of someone describing their childhood home. We have weather systems that regularly produce wind speeds over 300 kilometers per hour. Our oceans reach pressures that would crush most materials down to the atomic level. Surface temperatures range from about -89 degrees Celsius in our polar regions to +70 degrees in our deserts. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The delegates looked at each other in confusion and growing horror. What this human was describing weren't survival statistics. These were conditions that would instantly kill most known life forms. Yet, she spoke about them like a travel agent promoting vacation destinations. Counselor Murthok, whose species required specialized cooling systems to survive even mild temperatures, made a choking sound. Did you say -89 degrees? Would your people live in such conditions? Well, not without proper clothing, Park laughed, as if the question was amusing. Though some of our athletes do compete in those temperatures for sport, the word sport sent another wave of shocked whispers through the assembly. These humans participated in potentially lethal conditions for entertainment. And the +70-degree areas? Asked another delegate, his voice trembling. Those are actually quite pleasant during the summer months, Park replied cheerfully. Perfect weather for outdoor festivals and beach activities. Several delegates needed immediate medical attention as the implications hit them. This human was describing temperature ranges that spanned nearly 160 degrees Celsius, as if they were minor variations in weather patterns. Of course, Park continued with casual friendliness. Those are just the mild zones where most of our cities are located. We also have regions with active volcanism, areas with constant seismic activity, and zones where the very air is toxic. 2. Most life forms. She paused, seeming to notice the horrified expressions around her for the first time. I hope that gives you a good overview of our beautiful planet. We'd love to have you visit sometime, though we'd need to make sure you bring appropriate protective equipment. The delegates sat in shocked silence, finally understanding that they weren't just meeting another species, they were encountering survivors from a world that was essentially a galactic-scale torture chamber, and these beings considered it home. The merchant ships drifted peacefully through space, carrying valuable cargo between star systems. It was supposed to be a routine trade mission. Human vessels flew alongside their new alien partners, Liquithians, who looked like tall, graceful beings with 4 arms and shimmering silver skin. Captain Kim stood on the bridge of his ship, the Soul, watching the stars through the main window. His crew was relaxed, sharing stories and laughing with their alien counterparts over the communication channels. After months of tense negotiations, humans and Catharians were finally working together. Then everything went wrong in an instant. Bright red energy beams suddenly lit up the darkness as pirate ships dropped out of hyperspace. They had been waiting in ambush, hidden behind a dead moon. The merchant vessels were sitting ducks, loaded with cargo and completely unprepared for battle. Pirates. "All ships take evasive action," shouted Commander Zalth from the lead Cytherian vessel. His voice carried the wisdom of a species that had survived for thousands of years by being careful and smart. The alien ships immediately began backing away from the attackers, their pilots following ancient protocols passed down through generations. Retreat, regroup, call for help, and fight only when you have overwhelming advantage. This was how civilized species handled conflict, but Captain Kim was already doing something completely different. "All hands, battle stations," he barked into the ship's intercom. "Engineering, I need every bit of power you can give me." Navigator Han, plot a direct course to that big pirate ship. Navigator Han, a young officer who had graduated top of his class, turned around with confusion written all over his face. "Sir, are you sure that's their flagship? It's 3 times our size and armed with heavy weapons." "I'm sure," Kim replied calmly, his fingers dancing over the control panels. "Set collision course. Maximum speed, Captain." Han's voice cracked with panic. "That's suicide. We'll be destroyed on impact." Kim looked at his navigator with a kind of steady confidence that only came from growing up on Earth. "Han, trust me. We've survived worse than this." The Soul's engines roared to life with power that made the entire ship vibrate. While the Cytherian vessels continued their careful retreat, the human ship suddenly shot forward like a bullet fired from a gun. "Commander." Zalth watched his sensors in complete disbelief. "What are they doing?" he whispered to his crew. "No species. Uses ramming attacks. It's madness." His tactical officer, a being with 6 eyes that could process information faster than any computer, stammered as he spoke. "Sir, they're not slowing down. They're actually accelerating." The Soul smashed into the pirate flagship with the force of a meteor hitting a planet. Metal screamed against metal as the human ship's reinforced hull punched through layers of armor like it was made of paper. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels, and for a moment, space was filled with spinning debris and flashing explosions. The Cytherian crews held their breath, certain they had just watched their human allies commit suicide in the most spectacular way possible. In their culture, such an action would be remembered as a noble but foolish sacrifice. Then, Captain Kim's voice crackled over the communication system, calm and steady, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Pirate flagship neutralized. The Soul is operational and ready for the next target. Anyone else want to try their luck?" Commander Zelt's 4 eyes went wide as he stared at his tactical display. The Soul had emerged from the wreckage with her. Front end crumpled and smoking, but she was still flying, still fighting, still hungry for more battle. "Are they still alive?" whispered his second in command. A question that would haunt Cytherian military academies for generations to come. The remaining pirate ships, seeing their flagship destroyed by what they thought was a suicide attack, quickly decided they had picked the wrong fight. They jumped back into hyperspace, fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. Commander Zelth sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. These humans had turned certain death into victory. Through sheer audacity and toughness that defied all logic, the research station spun helplessly through space like a broken toy, its engines dead and systems failing. Station Kepler had been studying the massive red giant star when a solar flare knocked out their main power. Now they were falling toward the star's burning outer layer. And everyone knew what that meant. Dr. Vex High, the Mylonian station commander, sent out desperate emergency signals as his ship drifted closer to the deadly corona. His people were brilliant scientists with purple skin and large black eyes, but they were also fragile. Even with their best protective suits, they could only survive a few minutes near such intense radiation. 6 hours until we reach lethal proximity, announced his science officer, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. After that, the heat will cook us right through our suits. Meanwhile, the emergency rescue fleet gathered at a safe distance from the star. Ships from a dozen different species had responded to the distress call. But they all came to the same conclusion as they watched their sensor readings. Fleet Admiral Kestar, a lizard-like being with dark green scales and 3 separate brains, addressed the assembled captains through the communication network. His voice was heavy with sadness as he delivered the bad news. "The radiation levels near that star are beyond anything our ships can handle," he announced. "Our most advanced shielding would fail within minutes. I'm afraid we must accept that the station crew is lost." The alien captains nodded grimly. They had seen the computer simulations. Any rescue ship that got close enough to help would be destroyed by radiation so intense it would literally melt their hulls. It was simple physics. No known technology could survive in the corona of a red giant star. Then Captain Song stepped forward from the human vessel Busan. She was a middle-aged woman with short black hair and calm, steady eyes that had seen too many impossible situations. "Admiral." Requesting permission to attempt rescue, she said in a matter-of-fact tone, as if she was asking to pick up groceries. Admiral Kestar's scales rippled with confusion and distress. "Captain Song, I appreciate your courage, but it's impossible. The radiation alone would kill your entire crew before you got halfway there." Song's expression didn't change. "Sir, the Busan is specifically designed for solar operations. We've done this kind of mission before?" The alien commanders looked at each other in disbelief. No species in galactic history had ever built ships capable of flying into stellar coronas. It was considered pure suicide, the temperature readings alone, ... began one of the other rescue captains. "We can handle it," Song interrupted gently, but firmly. "With respect, Admiral, we'd like to try." Within an hour, the Busan was diving straight into hell itself. The human ship's hull began glowing as it entered the star's outer atmosphere, surrounded by plasma hot enough to vaporize most metals instantly. Chief Engineer Cho stood in the engine room, watching his temperature gauges climb steadily. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the room heated up, but he remained calm and focused. "Captain, engine room temperature is now 67 degrees Celsius, he reported over the intercom. "Should I activate emergency cooling systems?" Captain Song's voice came back steady and relaxed. "Not yet, Cho. We're still within normal operating range. Let me know when we hit 80 degrees. The assembled alien fleet watched their sensors in complete shock. The radiation levels the humans were experiencing would have killed any of their crews 10 times over. Yet the Busan continued deeper into the corona, apparently unbothered by conditions that defied every law of survival they knew. 20 minutes later, the Busan emerged from the stellar fire with the rescued station in tow. The ship's hull glowed, cherry red, like heated metal, and wisps of plasma still danced around the edges of her shields. Dr. Yoon, the ship's medical officer, filed her post-mission report with typical human understatement. "All crew members accounted for. Minor dehydration noted in engineering section. No serious injuries. Recommend increasing water rations on future solar missions." Admiral Kestar stared at the impossible scene before him, his 3 brains working overtime to process what he had witnessed. These humans had just flown through conditions that would have instantly destroyed his most powerful warships. They were treating it like a routine training exercise. Dr. Vexai had been the galaxy's leading expert on alien biology for over 300 years. His purple tentacles had examined creatures from 1,000 different worlds. He had written textbooks that were studied in medical schools across 50 star systems. He thought he had seen everything the universe had to offer. Then the humans arrived, and everything he knew about life became meaningless. Lieutenant Kong lay on the examination table in the medical bay, chatting casually with the nurses as if he was getting a routine checkup. But the readings on Dr. Vexai's medical scanner told a very different story. According to every law of biology he knew, the young human should have been dead for hours. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Dr. Vexai said, his voice shaking as he read the impossible data for the 5th time. "They were exposed to the vacuum of space for 47 seconds. Kong nodded like it was no big deal. "There was a hull breach in Section C during the meteor shower. Someone had to go out and patch it up, and I was closest to the airlock."
High's 3 hearts nearly stopped beating.
Exposure to vacuum for more than 10 seconds would cause any known species to explode as the air in their lungs expanded. Their blood would literally boil from the pressure change. Yet this human was sitting up and making jokes with the medical staff. And you were also exposed to radiation during a solar storm? The doctor continued, his tentacles trembling as he checked the readings again. Oh, that, Kong said with a shrug. About 15 minutes while I was fixing the external sensors. The storm hit faster than we expected, but I had almost finished the repairs anyway. Dr. Vexai felt dizzy. The radiation levels from a solar storm would have reduced his own people to nothing but scattered atoms within seconds. Even the most advanced protective suits could only provide protection for maybe 30 seconds at most. Yet Kong's body showed only minor cellular damage that was already healing itself. Your body temperature dropped to 32 degrees Celsius during the repair work, Dr. Vexai said, reading from his scanner with growing disbelief. Kong laughed. Yeah, it got pretty cold out there in space. I was shivering pretty badly by the time I got back inside. But Medicru gave me some hot soup and threw a few blankets on me, warmed right up. The doctor's scanner nearly slipped from his tentacles. A 5-degree drop in body temperature would put his own species into immediate, life-threatening shock requiring emergency medical intervention. A 10-degree drop would mean certain death. Yet this human had survived a 20-degree temperature. Dropin described it as feeling pretty cold. Dr. Vexai pulled up his medical database. Searching through centuries of accumulated knowledge about different species and their survival limits, what he found made him question everything he thought. He knew about life in the universe. For humans, these weren't miraculous survival stories. According to their medical records, these conditions fell well within normal emergency parameters. Human emergency responders routinely dealt with injuries and exposures that would be considered instantly fatal for most other species. Tell me. Something, Dr. Vexai said, trying to keep his voice steady. What are your people's medical standards? At what point do humans consider an injury to be truly life-threatening? Kong looked confused by the question. What do you mean, sir? When would a human seek emergency medical treatment? What level of injury causes your people to panic? Kong scratched his head and thought for a moment. Well, I guess if you're unconscious and bleeding a lot, that's pretty serious. Or if you can't walk and your internal organs are visible, then yeah, you'd probably want to get to a hospital pretty quick. Dr. Vexai's scanner clattered to the floor as his tentacles went limp with shock. These humans defined a medical emergency. At injury levels where most galactic species would have been dead for hours, their idea of pretty serious was beyond the maximum survivable trauma for virtually every other known life form. He realized he was looking at a species that had evolved on a world so hostile that their baseline survival capabilities exceeded the absolute limits of what other species could endure. They weren't just tough, they were biologically impossible, and they didn't even realize how extraordinary they were. The darkness of space suddenly filled with horror as massive shapes dropped out of hyperspace near the peaceful colony worlds. Of the Outer Rim, these weren't ships in any normal sense. They were living creatures the size of cities. With shells that looked like black armor and veins of sickly green light pulsing beneath their surfaces, the swarm had arrived. Within hours, the creatures began their terrible work. They fell upon the colonies like hungry locusts, consuming everything in their path. Ships, space stations, even entire planets disappeared into their massive mouths, converted into raw materials to build more of themselves. The galactic defense fleets responded with everything they had. Energy weapons that could crack moons fired. Continuously at the bioships, particle beams that could slice through the strongest metals struck the creatures' hulls. Nuclear missiles that could destroy cities exploded against their armor. Nothing worked. The weapons that had protected civilization for thousands of years bounced off the swarm's living armor like raindrops hitting a window. Worse yet, the creatures seemed to learn from each attack. After being hit by energy weapons for just a few minutes, their shells would adapt and become immune to that type of damage. Admiral Jin stood in the emergency command center, surrounded by holographic displays, showing the disaster unfolding across 17 star systems. Red markers indicated colonies that had gone silent. Yellow ones showed systems under attack. There were no green markers left on the map. Status report, he demanded, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Tactical Coordinator, Vashti. A tall alien with silver skin and 4 arms delivered the news with a voice empty of hope. 17 systems have gone completely dark, sir. No communication, no survivors detected. The swarm is consuming everything faster than we can evacuate. What? About our weapons? Any progress on penetrating their defenses? None, sir. Our particle beams are completely useless. The bioships adapt to our weapons within minutes of first contact. Each creature becomes immune to whatever we hit it with. The assembled military leaders sat in stunned silence. These were beings who had conquered entire sectors of the galaxy through superior technology and tactical brilliance. Now they were facing an enemy that simply ate their best efforts and grew stronger. Counselor Thane, an elderly statesman whose people had survived 3 galactic wars, spoke up with a trembling voice. What about the human forces? They have ships. In this sector, Admiral Jin's expression changed as he pulled up the human fleet deployment reports. Interesting. They've specifically requested permission to deploy to the front lines. High Counselor Zephyra, whose species was known for their logical thinking, made a sound of disbelief. That's complete madness. If our most advanced fleets, with weapons that can destroy planets, can't even scratch these creatures, what possible hope do the humans have? But Admiral Jin was studying something else. Historical reports from humanity's military archives. While other species had developed warfare into a precise science, humans seemed to approach combat in a completely different way. Their tactics looked chaotic, unpredictable, almost random compared to the ordered battle plans of civilized races. Maybe we're thinking about this all wrong, Jin said slowly, his mind working through the implications. We're trying to fight the swarm like civilized beings using civilized methods. What do you mean? Asked Counselor Thane. Look at human military history, Jin continued, bringing up files on the main display. Every other species in the galaxy fights to minimize casualties and maximize efficiency. We use our best weapons in the most logical way possible. Oh, and the humans? Jin paused as he read through reports of human conflicts. The humans don't fight like civilized beings. They fight like survivors, like creatures who have spent their entire evolutionary history learning to kill things that were trying to kill them. Even as they spoke, the human battle fleet was already moving toward the war zone. Fleet Admiral Shin commanded the massive dreadnought Inchin, lending a group of ships that looked crude and brutal. Compared to the sleek vessels of other species, unlike every other military force in the galaxy, the humans weren't retreating. To regroup, they weren't calling for reinforcements or requesting better weapons. They weren't even asking for backup. They were advancing straight toward the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever seen. And they were doing it with the confidence of a species that had never met a threat they couldn't eventually kill. The human fleet materialized out of hyperspace like ghosts emerging from a nightmare. Instead of approaching the swarm territory cautiously, like any sane military force would do, Admiral Shin had ordered his ships to jump directly into the heart of enemy space. What was supposed to be a careful scouting mission had instantly become an allowed invasion. The bridge of the flagship was eerily calm as sensor operator Jang streaming across his screens. Admiral, I'm detecting massive bioship formations ahead. Looks like 47 vessels of different sizes and configurations. Admiral Shin nodded without showing any emotion. Round him, his crew prepared for battle with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this many times before. All ships. Form attack pattern Delta. Remember what we discussed? We're not trying to be smarter than them, or stronger than them. We're trying to be more willing to die than they are. The swarm creatures detected the human approach and moved to intercept. Their living ships were marvels of biological engineering, with armor that could adapt to any weapon within minutes of first contact. As the humans approached, the bioship's outer shells began shifting and changing, preparing to counter the energy weapons that every civilized species used. Instead, they were hit by a storm of metal projectiles moving at incredible speeds. The kinetic rounds punched through their adaptive armor before it could adjust, tearing massive holes in the creature's hulls. Captain, you commanded the destroyer, Guangzhou. Watching through her view screen as swarm bioships returned fire, energy beams struck her ship's armor, peeling away layers of metal like someone removing paint with a blowtorch. Any rational commander would have ordered a retreat to preserve their vessel and crew. Instead, Captain, you did something that no other species in galactic history had ever attempted. All hands prepare for ramming speed. Engineering, get ready to overload the reactor on my command. Her crew didn't question the order. They had trained for this scenario countless times. The Guangzhou accelerated directly toward the largest bioship, using itself as a guided missile weighing thousands of tons. The swarm creature's biological computer systems had no programming for this situation. In millions of years of evolution, they had never encountered an enemy that would deliberately destroy their own ships to damage the enemy. The collision tore a crater several kilometers wide in the bioship's side, and the reactor explosion finished the job, while the space battle raged above. Something even more extraordinary was happening inside the damaged bioships. Human Marines, led by Colonel Park, were boarding the alien vessels through the holes blasted in their hulls. This was perhaps the most impossible part of the entire operation. The internal environment of a bioship was lethal to virtually every known form of life. The air was poisonous, the temperature was far below freezing, and the gravity was crushing. Status report, Colonel Park requested over the communication system. Sergeant Kim's voice crackled back through the static. Atmosphere is a methane-sulfur mixture that would kill most aliens instantly. Temperature is holding steady at minus 40 degrees Celsius. How's the gravity situation? About 2.3 times Earth normal? It's like carrying a heavy backpack, but nothing we can't handle. The Marines moved through the bioship's corridors like they were taking a walk through a dangerous neighborhood back on Earth. They carried plasma rifles and explosive charges, methodically destroying the creature's vital organs from the inside. The swarm had evolved over millions of years to consume entire civilizations. They had adapted to counter every known military tactic and survive in the harshest environments the galaxy could offer. But they had never encountered a species that considered boarding enemy vessels in lethal conditions to be routine military procedure. Within 6 hours, the human fleet had completely destroyed the bioship cluster and was already moving toward the next target. Their casualty reports made for grim reading: dozens of ships damaged or destroyed, hundreds of crew members killed or wounded. But where other species would have considered such losses to be a catastrophic defeat requiring immediate withdrawal, the humans filed them under acceptable casualties and requested reinforcements to continue the advance. The message they sent back to headquarters was typically brief: first engagement successful. Ready to proceed to next objective. Send more ships. Deep in the heart of swarm space, something unprecedented was happening to the creature that had consumed 17 star systems. The Swarm Queen, a vast intelligence that had existed for millions of years, was experiencing an emotion her species had never evolved: pure primal fear. Her consciousness stretched across thousands of bioships and dozens of conquered worlds. But everywhere she looked, the reports were the same. These strange creatures called humans were doing the impossible. They weren't following any logical patterns of behavior that she understood. After losing hundreds of ships and thousands of crew members, they should have retreated. After suffering casualties that would have ended any other species war effort, they should have tried to negotiate. Instead, the humans kept pushing deeper into her territory, fighting harder with each passing hour. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of her assault carrier Daegu, studying the tactical displays with exhausted but determined eyes. Half of her fleet was damaged or limping along on emergency power. Her crew had been fighting continuously for 18 hours without rest. But there, on the screen ahead of them, was their ultimate target. "Admiral, we've found her," reported Navigation Officer O, his voice tight with exhaustion and excitement. "The Queen's primary biomass is directly ahead. Computer estimates her size at about 40 million tons." Admiral Shin's voice crackled. Over the communication system from the fleet flagship, "Outstanding work. All ships. This is our target. Everything we've done has led to this moment." The Queen marshaled her most powerful defensive forces, sending wave after wave of bioships. To protect her massive form, these were her elite guardians. Creatures that had never known defeat in millions of years of conquest. But the humans fought like their homeworld. It's taught them with creativity born from desperation and a willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Ship after ship crashed through the defensive lines, their crews treating certain death like just another problem to solve. Engineer WY called up from the Daegu's reactor room, sweat pouring down his face as he monitored systems pushed far beyond their design limits. Captain, core temperature is at 150% of normal levels. We've got maybe 30 minutes before the whole thing explodes. Captain Chen's response was immediate and calm. Then we've got 29 minutes longer then. We need to finish this job. The Queen watched in growing horror as her most powerful bioships were destroyed by tactics that made no evolutionary sense. These humans were using their own ships as weapons and their own lives as ammunition. It was madness, but it was working then. The human boarding pods punched through her outer shell, and the Queen felt terror like nothing she had ever imagined. The creatures moving through her internal passages weren't just surviving in conditions that should have killed them. Instantly, they were thriving in her most toxic defensive environments. Sergeant No moved through the Queen's neural chambers, his environmental suit registering atmospheric conditions that would dissolve most known materials within seconds. The temperature was hot enough to melt steel, the pressure was crushing, and the air was filled with acid vapor, found the primary. Brain cluster, he reported calmly into his communicator. Placing explosive charges now. The Queen's voice boomed through her bioacoustic communication system, a sound of pure desperation. Why do you continue this insanity? Your losses are beyond catastrophic. Your species should be extinct. Colonel SEO's response came back over the communication channel, casual and almost bored. Lady, we're from Earth. On our planet, everything tries to kill us every single day. You're not special, you're just Tuesday. As the explosive charges detonated throughout her primary consciousness, the Swarm Queen's final moments brought her a terrible understanding. She had encountered something far worse than just another predator species. She had met the ultimate. Survivors, beings who had learned to wage war against impossibility itself and win. The humans would call this a victory and add it to their military records. But the Queen understood what it really represented. The moment when a species evolved on a death world proved that they were more dangerous than anything the ordered galaxy could produce. In her last seconds of existence, the Queen grasped the final truth. Every threat that had ever existed on Earth had learned the same lesson she was learning now. When you try to kill humanity, they don't just fight back, they kill you harder, faster, and more completely than you ever thought possible. The age of the swarm was over. The age of humanity had begun.